You're listening to Convenience Matters, brought to you by NACS. We'll talk about what we see at stores and what the future may hold for our industry.
Okay, this is a little ironic. Thanksgiving just happened, but we're going to talk about something that retailers are least thankful for: swipe fees. In late November, the Senate Judiciary Committee held another hearing on swipe fees. It was the 18th hearing on swipe fees that have cost retailers more than $1 trillion since 2006. This is a big issue for NACS, for convenience retailers, and retailers in general. What we'd like to do today is set up part one of a two-part conversation talking about today's hearing. Part one is I'd like to give you a quick summary of what two of the speakers said in their written testimony, and then we'll share what NACS General Counsel Doug Kantor said in today's hearing, and we'll follow that up with a part two talking to Doug about some of the Q&A that he handled as part of this hearing. So in hearings, there's multiple witnesses, and generally the way it works out is witnesses read their testimony, they have an initial discussion, and then there's a Q&A that takes up the bulk of the hearing. I want to read two quick comments from witnesses that were from the retail side. First, there's a owner of a bookstore called Bat and Kill Books in upstate New York, and this person's name is Christopher Callahan. And he, like convenience retailers, faces the problem of swipe fees. And he had one line or one paragraph I thought was worth mentioning from his written testimony. In the past, our credit card fees averaged about 2.4% of each credit card transaction. That's on the total of the transaction before I pay my expenses. Very similar to convenience retailers. That's Jeff talking, not the testimony. As a co-owner of business, I can only take profits out of my net margins after taking out expenses. Essentially, Visa and MasterCard have taken an ownership interest in my bookstore with primacy over my own interest. They are silent partners that we never asked for or wanted. I think those are words that probably can connect with any retailer. The second piece of testimony that I'd like to read is from Professor Roger Alford, who is a professor at Notre Dame and has studied the issues of swipe fees. And what I like about his comments is he really puts it into the consumer's perspective. He writes that swipe fees are a surprising large part of consumer expenditures. Last year, the average American paid $1,102 in swipe fees. More than, get ready for this, they spent on pets, coffee, or alcohol. Surveys have not revealed whether paying a hidden fee to swipe a credit card brings greater consumer satisfaction than owning a pet, drinking a morning coffee, or consuming alcohol, but one can surmise the answer. I'll answer that. No, it does not. It does not feel better than having a morning cup of coffee, enjoying a cold one, or having a pet. It feels much, much worse. And I think that's just great context for looking at how our industry is defining and has defined swipe fees. So with that being said, let's play the audio of NACS General Counsel Doug Kantor's testimony before the Senate Judiciary hearing in, I'm going to read this long name, the hearing, Breaking the Visa MasterCard Duopoly, Bringing Competition and Lower Fees to the Credit Card System. If you want to listen to the whole testimony, type that into Google or your favorite search engine. You can find it all there. Otherwise, wait till next week, and Doug can give you a personal blow-by-blow on what happens and what it means for you. Till then, take a listen to Doug.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to testify today. I appreciate this because What we have and what merchants, including the folks in my association and many others in our coalition, see every day is that there is an ongoing competition policy problem, a real antitrust problem that is squarely within the jurisdiction of this committee that affects them every single day. And that is that Visa and MasterCard have formed the banks that issue credit cards under their names into pricing cartels. They each set the prices that all of their bank members charge. They all agree to charge the same thing, and those banks which compete on everything else don't compete on this. That leads to higher and higher fees and higher costs on Americans every single day. If you take a look at it, both Visa and MasterCard in their testimony very openly say they don't set the interest rates that the banks charge to consumers. They don't set the fees that banks charge to consumers. They don't issue the cards. Yet here they set the price to the merchants. It's the one place where there is no competition across those banks. We need that level of competition because the truth is that we all pay it. So, for example, in April of 2022, when both Visa and MasterCard increased their fees, we all paid more than $1.2 billion for that increase. In October of 2023, when they again increased their fees, $500 million more for all Americans. In April of this year, when they both increased fees, another $340 million. And I have with me a notice that Visa, even after just being sued in September by the Department of Justice, has scheduled an increase in their fees for January. That'll be over $100 million that folks will all have to foot the bill for. Now, with these fees going up, and you heard earlier Chris Callahan say 60% increase just since 2020, and his fees are up in 2024. We don't even have those numbers yet. This really hits all of us hard. And it hits the lowest income and lowest credit score folks the worst. Federal Reserve economists put out a study a couple years ago. $13 billion gets transferred from low-income, low credit score individuals to high-income, high credit score individuals through this system. It's an ongoing problem, and consumers don't know it. Everything about this is hidden from them. They're not aware of the role Visa and MasterCard play. They're not aware of the other processors in the system. They're not given information about the pricing or the fact that there's any fees at all. Wouldn't it be interesting and relevant to consumers when they're getting hit with some of the $14 billion they paid in late fees to be able to call their bank and say, hey, wait a minute, I know you got $1,100 in swipe fees from me. You can't cut me a break on this late fee? Of course it would be relevant, but they're not given that information. And so this idea that there's some consumer choice here that's a problem, consumers are not given this information. They don't have the tools to make this decision and that's on purpose because of the credit card banks. In order for economics and free market economics to work, the folks that actually pay the price and have the information have to make these market decisions. And the Credit Card Competition Act would do that. It's actually very simple. It just says have two networks that work on the card, just like happens on debit cards today in the United States, just like happens in many other parts of the world today, including JP Morgan's recent announcement that they're going to do it voluntarily in France. Great. Then there's actually some price competition between those two networks. The merchant gets to make a choice. And oh, by the way, it's the bank that chooses the two. So everybody's got their choices to be made. The current system simply can't be justified. And frankly, I would even say with respect to smaller institutions, they are disadvantaged today. The point was made earlier that this helps level the playing field. It doesn't. Smaller institutions don't have the economies of scale that big banks have because they don't issue as many cards, so they have higher costs. By Visa and MasterCard locking in the prices that all those competitors charge, smaller banks are guaranteed a lower margin every time a card is swiped. And you know what? Big banks have taken advantage of that to dominate this market and get most of the market. One last thing I'll quickly say, and there's lots of things to talk about here, but this idea that, oh no, Visa, MasterCard have plenty of competition because there are all these new entrants like mobile payment apps and that sort of thing. According to the San Francisco Fed, those mobile payment apps are less than 1% of payments. I hope someday they will be very robust competitors. They're not today. The evidence of what they're able to get away with shows that there is an antitrust problem, and I appreciate the committee looking at it. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Kantor.
So that concluded Doug's testimony. Next week, we'll bring him back, and we'll talk about what it all meant. Till then, thanks for listening to Convenience Matters.
Convenience Matters is brought to you by NACS and produced in partnership with Human Factor. For more information, visit convenience.org.